and welcome to the spinning house here at Mount Vernon. My name is Margaret Lineberger and I'm a historic trades interpreter on the estate. And today we're going to be focusing on the loom, and I will be explaining how the loom itself works. Now, weaving at the very basic level is intertwining two sets of threads to make a whole cloth. For this project, the warp threads, which are the vertical threads, are tied to the loom, and the weft threads are my brown threads, and the brown threads are going to be woven into the warp. The loom itself is going to keep the warp threads taut, and it will separate out those threads as I'm weaving, so I can easily weave in my brown warp threads. But before the weaver can weave, the loom needs to be prepared or dressed with the warp threads. Once the warp threads are measured, the warp will be tied and wound onto the back beam of the loom. If wound evenly by the weaver, the back beam of the loom will prevent the warp threads from tangling and will maintain an even tension along the width of the project. The warp thread is then brought towards the middle of the loom, where we have 4 harnesses. On each of these harnesses, there are sets of heddles. The heddle has an eye through which each individual thread of the warp will be threaded. The 4 harnesses have 4 sets of warp threads attached to them, so the weaver can separate the warp threads while weaving according to a pattern. On this loom, harnesses 1 and 3 are attached to treadle or pedal 1, so that when the weaver presses on that treadle, harnesses 1 and 3 will lift, separating those threads from the rest of the warp. Once the heddles have been threaded, the weaver then threads the warp through the reed of the beater bar. The reed evenly spaces the warp across the width of the project and will also be used by the weaver to beat down the weft threads to make a more uniform cloth. Now the weaver ties the warp to the front beam of the loom. The front beam of the loom is also called the cloth beam, since the cloth is rolled onto this beam as the weaving progresses. Now the loom is prepared or dressed so the weaver can weave. To weave, I will separate out sets of threads by pressing the treadles of the loom. By pressing treadle 1 of the loom, harnesses 1 and 3 are lifted along with the warp that is threaded through the heddles. Those lifted threads create an opening called a shed, through which I can shoot my shuttle with my weft threads. In that single pass, I have gone over under all of my warp threads. I will then bring all of my warp together and bring the beater bar down to move that weft thread closer to the cloth I'm weaving. To continue my weave, I will then press treadle 2, lifting up harnesses 2 and 4 and their corresponding threads. I can then shoot my shuttle through the open shed again, trailing behind that brown weft thread, and then I'll bring the warp back together and bring that beater bar down so I have a more uniform cloth. And that is how weaving and the loom works.
Click the subscribe button below and the bell icon to get notifications for new videos about George Washington and behind-the-scenes work at Mount Vernon.